Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything. I'm coming at you with another Wargaming and miniature video. In this video, we're going to be talking about 2nd edition Bolt Action. This is our Bolt Action Boot Camp. In this video, we're going to be talking about buildings and how they impact the rules and how the rules affect the buildings. And this should be the last chapter that explains the rules. We will have one more video after this explaining armies, putting armies together, army concepts, ideas, thoughts. It's really going to, the last video is really just a summary of all the videos we talked about and putting it all together. Okay, but in this video we're going to be talking about buildings. You can't have a World War II war game without some buildings, right? You're always going to have buildings around. They're either going to be rubbled buildings, they're going to be built up areas like cities or towns. You might have a farm out in the woods or something like that, but you're always going to have a building. Not 100% of the time, but buildings really do bring your eyes to the battle, and so it's important to know the rules involved around buildings. All right, now there's a couple of different buildings. Two primary styles of buildings. Some buildings have removable roofs that you can take off and that you can put troops inside. Some buildings do not. Some buildings are maybe they're a model kit that you put together and it's 100% sealed, or maybe the building like this is sealed. There's no way to take the roof off of this. It's actually kind of like it's a plaster model. There are other models that are resin. So they're like solid resin pieces that you can't put troops inside. Okay, so you and your opponent have to decide before the game begins if you can enter buildings or not. Everybody wants to enter buildings. I would recommend it. It's really the whole idea behind putting a building on there is taking cover, using the building as a terrain feature. Don't just have it block line of sight. All right, now just because you can't take the roof off and you and your opponent say, yes, we can enter buildings, what happens is you need to put the models off to the side. Maybe if it's got a flat roof, you can put them on the top, or maybe you can put a token next to it saying that this squad is next to that building. What I would do is I would just put the models next to the building and say these guys are all inside the building. You know, however you want to do it. I mean, just so that they know that it's inside the building and not outside the building. If you have units around the outside and you want units on the inside, then put it behind the building so it's not so obvious that they're not blatantly like out in the front. That's what I would do. So you can enter buildings even if you can't remove the top. You just have to agree with your opponent that that is a possibility. Like especially with the resin buildings. Okay, now in the course of a game, only infantry is the only thing that can enter a building. To enter a building, you got your troops out, you know, and you're thinking about, hey, we're going to jump in that church, right? You have to give them a run order. You cannot give them any other order. They can't advance into a building. They have to run. Okay? So, one model has to be able to reach a window or a door. Okay, so I'm going to move this. I'm going to slightly change this around a little bit. Okay, hypothetically, let's say there's no windows on this side and the farthest window is over here, but there is a door right there. This guy can't make it because he's got a 12-inch move, but this is more than 12 inches. But this guy can make it there. So he gets within 1 inch of the door. This guy could probably also get within 1 inch of the door, and so could this guy. But let's say these guys out here can't get within 1 inch of the door, but they can get within 1 inch of the building. If they can get within 1 inch of the building, they're treated as entering the building. The only thing that you need to worry about is one of your guys has to be within 1 inch of a door or a window. And the rest have to be within 1 inch of the building itself. Once that happens, you pick up all the models Once this happens, you pick up all the models and you can just place them in the center. You don't even need to worry about putting them anywhere in particular. There's no reason for you to worry about where you put them in the building. Okay, so you just place them in there. Now there is a special note that infantry and artillery can set up in a building. So yes, you can put that anti-tank gun on the second floor in a building if you want. Now if a building has more than one floor, units enter on the ground floor. Now if you set up artillery in a building, it will not be able to move for the duration of the game. And you cannot enter a building with a regroup move. So like you do a close assault to a guy outside the building, you roll your die to get the extra inches of movement. You cannot use it to go into the building. Remember, you have to use the run order to get into a building. Leaving a building. You can leave in any way. You can run out of a building, you can advance out of a building. If you run out of a building, you can close assault someone. So it doesn't restrict your movement for exiting, only entering. If you want to change floors, let's say there's multiple levels, there's a second floor, there might even be a third or fourth floor. If that's the case, an advance order will bring you up one floor or down one floor. A run order will put you up 2 floors and or down 2 floors. Okay, so advance 1 floor, run 2 floors. Okay, 1 unit occupies a floor. You cannot put 2 units in the same floor. Most buildings will only allow 1 unit per floor. If you and your opponent decide that a building is large enough to hold 2 units per floor, that's between you and them. But normally, buildings are only large enough to hold 1 unit per floor. Now there are some particularly large buildings like train stations or factories or something like that. Each portion of the house should be about 6 by 6 or maybe 8 by 8. If you make something that's like 12 by 6, then consider that to be like 2 houses side by side. And what I would do is I would put like a wall separating them so that you could have units in one side, you could have units in the other side, and that's fine. And treat them as 2 separate buildings, really. And with most buildings being 6 by 6, you can use the advance order to move from one to an adjacent building area. You could think of them as the living room going into the dining room or whatever, but those areas are considered buildings in their own right, and an advance order will let you move to an adjacent building, and a run order will let you move to adjacent buildings. Alright, so that's movement and occupying a building. And remember, when you're occupying the building, it doesn't matter. You don't have to put the models behind a window. You don't have to get down behind the window and look in and see what model you can see to shoot and things like that. We're getting to that here in just a second. Okay, shooting. Shooting from a building. Okay, units inside a building can shoot from any visible opening, windows or doors. So I've got 6 guys here, right? And I want to shoot out this wall. I want to shoot out over here. Every door or window is allowed to have 2 people or 2 models shoot from it. Basically, I just pick which 2 are shooting out of each window, and then I just measure from the window. I don't even have to move the models. It's assumed that they're all kind of shuffling and shifting on the inside, and they're taking the best cover that they can from the doors and the windows, and they're not stagnant. So you don't even have to place them. If you want, you can, just for memory purposes. If you want to like put these 2 next to this window, and maybe put these 2 over here, and maybe put these 2 over here, you can do that, but you don't have to do that at all. All you need to do is know that these guys are inside the building. That's all that matters. And then you just measure your ranges from the walls. Alright, now I'm going to turn this building a little bit so you can see that it's got windows on 2 sides, right? You got your windows along here, you got your windows along there, and this squad is occupying that building. Now this squad is allowed to fire some of his guys out of this side and some of his guys out of this side. That is perfectly fine. You can split your fire when you're inside of a building. So he decides he wants to fire 2 guys out this side and the rest of the 4 other guys out this side. That's fine. These guys all have to fire at the same target, and these guys all have to fire at the same target. So if there was 2 squads out here, they can't split their fire between the 2 squads, but they can split their fire from sides. So 1 shot from each side. Now, fixed weapons are done a little bit differently. So if you have a machine gun that's, that's considered fixed, medium machine gun or heavier, or an anti-tank gun, it has a limited firing arc. You got to specify the opening that they're actually deployed. That's the one type of unit that you have to say, okay, it's actually deployed at this window right here. And then it would have its firing arc from that window, just like normal. Now, if they're given an advance or run order, then that unit could be redeployed to a different opening on that floor. Or go up a floor or down a floor or whatever, except anti-tank guns, they can't move. Anti-tank guns, or I should say artillery pieces, anti-tank guns or anything like that that are deployed in a building, they're unable to move at all. But if it's like a machine gun that's got the fixed characteristic, you can move it around. Okay, plunging fire. This is really cool. If you're on the 2nd floor or higher and you're shooting at a tank that's within 12 inches, you actually hit them in the top armor. So what is that? +1 to your penetration bonus? If you put like if you put a artillery piece in an upper floor and it fires indirect at a tank, it doesn't get the bonus doubled. Not that I don't think anybody can fire within 12 inches of indirect anyway, but maybe. Okay, or maybe you're on a flat roof and you're firing a mortar. When you get shot at when you're in a building, okay, this is important. This is the most important thing about a building. This is one of the reasons why you take cover in a building, is because you don't want to get shot at, right? Okay, I mean, the buildings are great for that. Okay, units armed with small arms can shoot an enemy inside a building if they have a line of sight to any opening. So what if I say, all my guys are over here shooting out over here, right? But the enemy's got a guy, okay, so all my guys are shooting, you can't really see that, can you? But all my guys are shooting out this side. They're all firing out this way. And what if my enemy's got a guy over here, he can still shoot me. He just has to be able to find an opening, this door, on the side that he's at. So as long as, and when he shoots, he just shoots at the door. So when you've got units, that's why you don't have to put them next to the wall. You just put them in the center. Because even if they're over here, they can still get hit. So you're firing at an opening. You fired a window, you fired a door, what have you. Measure the distance to the opening. And then there is something about loopholes. I should probably talk about that. Okay, if there is a wall, which on this building I deliberately made it so that there's an opening on all 4 sides. But if you have a building that does not have an opening, and let's pretend this door, if that door is not there, and this building here had no walls, or no windows and no walls, but I deployed a unit in there at the beginning of the game, I could nominate somewhere along this wall as being a loophole. So you would have to put a little token down, a little marker, something, draw on your map. No, you don't want to do that. But you could put something down saying that there's a loophole there, and then what that basically means is now there's a window there. So basically the guys inside cut a hole in the window so that they could shoot out, but what that also means is they could be shot at, because all the enemy has to be able to see or measure to is the opening. Now if you have a heavy weapon, apart from flamethrowers, but if you have a heavy weapon, you can fire at a building even if you don't see an opening. They can fire directly at a wall, basically. The heavy machine gun is considered a heavy weapon. So if you have a heavy machine gun, you can fire at the wall of a building without needing an opening. You can just fire at the building itself. But it's basically any weapon that has a penetration value can fire at a building. Any small arms fire has to fire at an opening. The only exception to the heavy weapon is the flamethrower. It has to shoot at an opening. Now you roll to hit the targets as normal, right? So you're giving them hard cover, so they get the -2 to be hit. If they haven't acted yet and they want to go ahead and go down, they can do that. If they go down, that increases the chance to hit by 2 as well. They also will benefit from this special rule for buildings called extra protection, and we'll get into that here in just a second. Okay, we'll talk about it right now. Extra protection. When targeting infantry or artillery units that are inside a building, the die roll an enemy requires to score damage is actually increased by 1. So basically they get 1 better. So if they're, regulars are 4 or better, now you need 5 or better. If it's a veteran, it's now 6 or better, etc. And that value is also modified by the penetration value as normal. So what is a heavy machine gun has a +1 penetration? So that would actually negate that +1 extra protection. Now the extra protection rule has no effect on flamethrowers or high explosive rounds. Now high explosive against buildings, when firing HE over open sites, and what they mean by that is direct fire. Against a building, simply choose a unit that you're aiming for. So I'm shooting at the building, I know this unit's on the ground floor, that's who I'm shooting at. I just have to measure to the wall of the building. It doesn't have to see any opening or not, because he's basically just shooting at the wall. He rolls to hit without any kind of 2-hit penalties for cover, because you're not looking for the +2 hard cover bonus, because you're actually hitting the hard cover. But you still get like your pin penalties and your movement penalties and all that stuff, and range penalties. Okay, now if you score a hit, the shell has managed to find or make an opening, so basically it punches through the wall. The unit inside that floor of the building suffers a number of hits equal to basically the size of the HE round. So it either is D3, D6, 2D6, or 3D6. You don't use a template. Why? Because the player that owns the troops doesn't actually place the models in the building. They're just clumped in the middle. That's all that matters. So I'm not going to penalize them by putting a template over that, because that would be unfair. So you just roll the dice to see how many guys you hit. D3, D6, 2D6, or 3D6. And if they've not taken an action, again, they can go down, just like normally when hit with HE. And if they do that, the number of hits is halved. If you go down, that doesn't give you a 2 better chance of me not hitting you, because I'm not actually aiming at the unit, I'm aiming at the building. So when I hit so by you going down, that doesn't lower my chance of hitting you. Once I've hit you, before you roll to see how many hits are caused, the player needs to determine if he's going to go down, and if he does, it halves the hits rounded up. Okay, when hit with HE, the extra protection rule for the building does not apply. Also, the extra protection from a gun shield would not apply. Yeah, in addition, if the weapon is hit by an HE value of 2d6 or greater, that basically means it's a 3 or a 4-inch template. So if it's hit with a 3-inch or a 4-inch template, you roll the hits as normal, the 2d6 or the 3d6. And if you roll a 10 or better, the building has been reduced to rubble. Basically, all the models inside the building are destroyed. The building is actually picked up and removed and replaced by a piece of rubble terrain that you might have, or you can make it an area of rubble or something like that. So you pick the building up, you put an area of rubble in its place, and boom, now you've got rubble, and you just wiped out everybody. That's only if that 2d6 or 3d6 actually scores a 10 or more. It's blown to rubble. All infantry and artillery units are destroyed. Remove the building, replace it with a ruined equivalent of the area of rubble and debris. Okay, having said that, I want to just bring this up as a side note. This is not a building. That is not a building. That is an area of rubble and debris. That is rough terrain with cover. Maybe hard cover, +2 cover. But it's not a building. So it's treated as if these are like walls, and this is all rough ground. It's hard to move through. Okay, another point is, let's say you've got a unit in the building, and I drop an artillery piece on a unit outside the building. I put the template down, and the template is mostly over these guys, but maybe a little bit of the template goes over the building. It only hits the people outside the building. It does not hit anybody inside the building. The walls absorb all the shrapnel. To affect them inside the building, I have to target them. Now, unless we're talking about indirect fire. So you declare the unit, you measure to the building, just like before. Make sure it's not within your minimum range. Now, if you score a hit, you roll another die. And on a 4, 5, or 6, it explodes immediately, hitting the target on the upper floor of the building. On a 1, 2, or 3, the shell has plummeted straight through the topmost floor, so roll again to see if it explodes on the floor below. On a 4, 5, or 6, it explodes on the floor below, and you will hit the target on that floor. Once again, a 1, 2, or 3 means it continues to go through. And you keep doing that depending on how many floors of the building there is, because it might be a 10-story building. And then you got to determine if it hits the top and explodes, the next floor and explodes, there's a 50% chance it's going to explode per floor that it goes. And even if you hit an empty floor, you still need to roll the number of hits, because again, if you roll a 10 or better, you've rubbled the building. Alright, now I mentioned earlier that flamethrowers can only be used against troops inside of buildings when there's a window or a door or some other gap. They ignore hit modifiers for cover and are very useful when using against troops in buildings. As with HE, troops and gun crews get no protection from the gun shield or the extra protection rule. And if it's used against troops in buildings, then the building catches fire on a 4, 5, or 6. It's considered impassable from then on, all floors, and all surviving infantry units inside the burning building will immediately abandon it in the same way units disembark from a vehicle. Artillery units inside a burning building are automatically destroyed because guess what? They can't move. So flamethrowers shooting into a building have a 50% chance of catching the building on fire. And there's airstrikes against buildings. Forward air observer can call airstrikes against units in a building as long as they have line of sight to the building itself. And when the aircraft arrives, pin markers are placed around as normal, measuring ranges from the building itself. After pin markers have been placed, follow the procedure for indirect fire against units in a building, because the bomb that it's launching might actually penetrate the top floor and hit the bottom floor. It's one of those things. And of course, if the aircraft inflicts 10 or more hits before having for units that are going down, the building collapses. So it's a lot like indirect fire. And then artillery barrages against units in buildings. Artillery barrages are the ones that are coming from your artillery observers. Place the aiming point as normal. Place the aiming point as normal, and this is usually a point on the top of the building. When the barrage arrives, measure the distance between the aiming point and the building itself. If the building is in range, simply roll a die for each unit in the building as well as other units within range, including all units inside nearby buildings that are them. Because when you call in your barrage, you hit every unit within a certain radius. And as normal with HE, troops and gun crews hit by heavy howitzers resolve no protection from their gun shield or extra protection. The total hits inflicted on all units in the same building by all heavy howitzer hits result. And if the total is 10 or more hits, the building collapses. So, reading between the lines there, let's say you've got a building, and I've got a unit on the ground floor, and I have a unit on the top floor, and they're all within the barrage radius. I'm still rolling hits for the guys on the bottom, and I'm rolling hits for the guys on the top, and if the total between all of those is 10, the building collapses. So there's an increased chance, this is a game mechanic thing, there's an increased chance, I don't know if I agree with this, of the building collapses based on having more units in the building. And that just doesn't seem right to me, but that's the way the rules are written. And then empty buildings. They're allowed to target an empty building with HE weapons, flamethrowers, and airstrikes in order to attempt to destroy it or set it on fire. So yeah, if you want to do that, you can. Now you'll see some models out there, and this is just a side note again. You're going to see some models out there, and I'm going to make some actually, of buildings that have like broken walls, or they might have holes in the roof, or they might only have timbers for roof, or maybe one of the walls is collapsed. But it's still a building. So the way I envision it is like if it's basically level, it's rubble. But if it's a damaged building, it's got some battle damage to it, it's still a building. It's just damaged. Alright, close assaulting buildings. Infantry outside a building can assault enemy units occupying the ground floor of a building. Basically, you measure the move to an opening in the ground floor, just like you normally do, right? Resolve the assault sequence as normal, except that the assaulting models are moved into contact with the building, and at least one model must be in contact with the opening, just like moving into the building. And it's treated just like assaulting a defensive position, with a combat fought simultaneously by both sides. And if a unit assaults a building and wins the assault, it can use its regroup move to enter the building and take the place of the unit that has been defeated. Infantry units inside a building can assault units on a different floor, immediately above or below, or on the same floor of an adjoining connected building. And that's always considered to be a surprise charge. Basically, they're saying that that charge came from within 6 inches, so no reaction is available. Okay, tanks assaulting building. A heavy or super heavy tank can attempt to drive into a wooden or brick built building in the same way as already described for ramming other tanks. This is treated as an assault, and the building has a total damage value that is established randomly when the assault is made as follows. Wooden building, 2d6. Brick building, 3d6. Tanks are not allowed to attempt to assault fortifications such as pillboxes, blockhouses, tank traps, bunkers, or any other structures that are equally solid or substantial. Okay, this is meant to be a substantial building, like a full structure, not like a garden shed. If there's a garden shed out there, the tank would just overrun it. If the building scores higher damage against the tank as described in the vehicle ram, the building is a wooden shack, only superficial damage is caused. The tank model is placed in front of the building and failed to demolish it. If the building and tank score equally, then you get superficial damage against the vehicle, as for a ram, and the building is destroyed. If the tank scores highest, the building collapses in the same way as described with an HE shell, the building is destroyed, and the model represented is replaced with an area of rubble. The tank is placed within the rubble area and comes to a halt. Show this by giving them the down order. And finally, any tank that survives driving into a building takes a pin marker in the same way as if you survived a collision. Yes, a tank can crush a building. Might damage itself, but it could do it. Okay, especially if it's heavy or super heavy. The light tanks, no, they'll just bounce off the walls. Okay, artillery in buildings. Artillery units cannot enter buildings during the battle, but can be placed in buildings during deployment. We assume their position has been prepared in advance. So basically, if you're going to put an artillery piece in a building, they've made places so it could shoot. You pick one of the openings to fire from. This cannot be changed during the game. An artillery unit placed in this manner cannot move and cannot therefore be ordered to run or advance during the game. Its position and arc are both fixed. Okay, bunkers. Boink. The following rules cover bunkers, pillboxes, and other reinforced buildings specifically designed to protect soldiers from enemy fire. Bunkers follow the rules given for buildings with these exceptions. Bunkers can only be accessed through doors and not through the firing slits. I mean, it would be hard for a dude to climb in through one of these little slits, but the door right there would be a lot easier to get in through. Similarly, models can only fire towards firing slits that are not through doors or through solid walls. Okay, so what they're saying is when you're shooting at a bunker, you have to shoot at the door or an arrow slit. You cannot shoot a solid wall, even with heavy weapons, like even with a heavy machine gun or a cannon. You have to actually still shoot at the arrow slit or the door. It's extremely difficult to hit troops inside of a bunker. Cover modifier, which is normally -2, is treated as a whopping -4. So it's double. So this does make the flamethrowers a perfect option because they don't get any penalties for cover. HE weapons are not effective against bunkers. Okay, so after placing any pinning on the unit, hit as normal, do not roll to damage. Do proceed to roll for the number of hits caused anyway, as the hits may still bring down the bunker itself. Bunkers are not destroyed when suffered 10 hits like normal buildings, but if a bunker suffers 12 or more hits from an HE shell, it collapses. Tanks cannot assault bunkers, no matter how heavy they are. And bunkers are treated against airstrikes just as if it was artillery, so you have to roll 12 damage to bring the bunker down. You can do a pin, but you can't do any damage. Unless, of course, you bring the building or the bunker down, then you destroy everybody inside. Okay, I hope that explained the buildings. I know that was a little convoluted, and that's why there's a whole chapter on buildings. In general, let's break this down and give you a very brief summary in my own words, because that was straight from the Bolt Action rulebook. In my own words, to enter a building, you have to run. Every model has to get within 1 inch of the building. Only one model needs to be next to an opening. When you do that, you pick up all the models and you put them inside. So, imagine this guy way over here, you've got a run order and he's got 12 inches of movement and he makes it within 1 inch of the building. He gets that little extra movement of going inside. You want to run and you want to enter a building and everybody's able to make it up to the building within 1 inch. Except for one guy, he's just a little bit too far out. The unit does not go into the building. Once inside the building, you're on a ground floor. To change floors, you have to advance up 1, run up 2. Advance down 1, run down 2. Advance over 1, run over 2. Super good. Advance, run. Right. You have to issue orders to troops inside buildings just like normal. So they can fire, they can advance, shift, go levels or whatever, moving their fixed weapons, or they can run even. When exiting a building, You can advance, you can run, you can assault, just like normal. It doesn't impede you in any way leaving the building. You can fire 2 models per opening. So like on this side of the building, 8 models could fire. I just count 8 models, and I just measure them from the windows. That's how far they can shoot, exactly. You don't need to worry about shifting them around. If you want to, go ahead and shift them around just to help you remember which one's fired out of which windows. That's fine. You can fire out of all 4 sides in the same fire order. You just have to split your troops up to decide which side they're going to fire out of. All troops from one side have to target the same unit. So you can't split fire between 2 different targets from one side. Fixed weapons are assigned a window to fire out of. For them to change windows, they have to be given an advance order. These guys are not assigned windows. Regular infantry or whatever are not assigned windows. They can change freely between turns. That's no problem. Only the fixed weapons you got to deal with. Artillery pieces cannot enter a building. But once they are, if you set them up or deploy them inside a building, you pick an opening that they're set up at, and they're there for the rest of the game. They can't move, but they can shoot out of that opening. You can even put them on a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 10th level. When firing at a building, you can go down as normal. So you can half your hits from the artillery. You can also get a -2 to be hit. Hard cover gives them a -2 to be hit. When firing at a building, all you have to do is be able to find an opening. If a wall doesn't normally have an opening, and you deploy a unit in there at the start of the game, you can say that they have already made one opening. Call it a loophole. When firing at an infantry unit with small arms, they get extra protection, which basically gives them 1 extra. It makes it 1 harder to wound them when rolling damage. So regulars that normally are 4 become a 5, etc. When firing at them with heavy weapons, they still get the extra protection, but you get to use your penetration value against that extra protection. So if you have a high penetration value weapon, it reduces the extra protection, like a heavy machine gun. High explosives. When firing a tank or a direct fire weapon at a building, you don't roll to hit the troops. You roll to hit the floor that the troops are on, which usually only has 1. Each building is only allowed to have 1 unit on that floor. If you hit the floor, no cover penalties. You roll damage from the blast, and it's based D3, D6, 2D6, 3D6, based on the template size. They take that number of hits. They don't get the extra protection. If you roll a 10 or more on that roll to damage, you destroy the building and everybody inside of it. Close assaults. When you close assault a building, the people inside are considered to be defensive or behind a defensive position, so the fight is simultaneous. If you are able to win and you eliminate the guys inside, you are able to occupy that floor. So that is one way that if you're downstairs and you're assaulting an upstairs, you assault the upstairs. They're considered defensive position, but they don't get to do a reaction fire because it's considered to be within 6 inches, and if you win, then you can go up to the 2nd floor. If you lose, well, you're eliminated. Plunging fire. If you are on the top floor and you're shooting down at a tank within 12 inches, you get a +1 penetration. Bunkers are a little bit different. When firing at a building that is considered reinforced, you have to fire at an opening, as opposed to HE or a heavy weapon, which can normally just fire at a wall. You have to fire at an opening. If you hit this heavy cover, it's considered doubled, so they get a +4 to be hit, because the arrow slits are a lot smaller than a window, and plus it's reinforced concrete. To be able to rubble a building, you have to roll a 12 or higher with your high explosive rounds. Tanks can close assault units. Basically, they close assault buildings. They don't close assault the unit. If a heavy or super heavy tank runs into a building, there's a chance that it will do damage. If it does less damage, then the tank takes superficial damage, and if it does equal or more damage, then the building is rubbled, and it occupies the rubbled space with a pin marker. Either way, it takes a pin marker. Tanks cannot close assault bunkers. All right, now I hope I went over everything, and I hope I reiterated and rehashed everything, and then next should be our last video for our Bolt Action Bootcamp, which talks about the nuances of the game, min-maxers, power gamers, setting up your army list for maximum potential, as well as I kind of discuss the way I'm going to play the game, and that's going to be kind of more of a talk, a conversation that I'm going to have, so it's not rules per se, it's more of a boot camp on how to play different ways to play, etc. All right, I'll see you then, and if you want to like this video, please do. If you want to subscribe to my channel, please do. And if you want to help support the channel, go ahead and hit the PayPal Me link in the description below. All donations are appreciated, and I'll catch you next time. Oh, and P.S. I don't know, I'm going to put this at the end of the video. You just saw me use my new 28mm Warlord German Grenadiers. They're the shit. All right.